strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today's topic is on your screens now. Woke versus Warhawk. Globalists provoke communal violence to stop Middle East peace. And that's, of course, referring to Trump's Middle East peace. Trump, of course, fresh off the back of signing a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, has gone on over the course of this week to say that Gaza is close now to a ceasefire as well. As Al Arabiya reports on your screens, US President Donald Trump pleads for progress in ceasefire talks in the war in Gaza, calling for a deal that would halt the fighting in the 20-month-long conflict as the sides appear to be inching closer to an agreement. So the trajectory is on course. Our regulars will know that's what we've been arguing since the start was Donald Trump's plan. He has been an avowedly and repeated anti-war candidate, president, then candidate again, and now president again in this, his third legitimate term in office. President Trump has been consistent in his anti-war stance. Some people, even within the MAGA camp, doubted that over the course of this Iran-Israel war and publicly stated their doubt. That is their right. But of course, time vindicated, and President Trump, rather than escalating the war between Iran and Israel, got involved to de-escalate the war by rug-pulling Netanyahu's pretext for goading Trump to join that war, thus provoking World War III. By rug-pulling that pretext, Trump, by striking in a prearranged strike against the Fordow nuclear facility in Iran, allowed for the Iranians to then prearrange their reciprocation on a US base in Qatar. That removed any pretext that Netanyahu any longer had for the Americans joining the war. He was arguing that that Fordow nuclear facility was only days away from producing nuclear weapons. By striking it, Trump removed that pretext. Netanyahu was forced back to the negotiating table. Remember something, those negotiations were already ongoing between Trump and Iran when Netanyahu struck Iran. Prior to that, remember this, Trump had negotiated a ceasefire with the Houthis in Yemen, again, by cutting out Israel. Again, prior to that, remember this, Trump visited Saudi Arabia and gave that keynote landmark policy speech in which he said the days of Middle East interventionism and neocon warmongering are over. So the trajectory is well and truly towards peace. The developments with the ceasefire between Iran and Israel only reconfirmed our point that Trump only got involved to de-escalate that conflict rather than to escalate it. Those who were doubting Trump from within the MAGA camp subsequently saw that these matters of war and peace are rarely determined by the whim and whimsical personalities of individual men, be they presidents or not. These are matters of state, matters of war and peace. They are subjected to many months, if not years, of planning. And our point, as is evident in last week's Warrior Creed live stream, as well as the write-up of that live stream in the Radical Dispatch, our point was that this was a deal that had been cut between Trump and Putin at the top. And the overall picture was that whereas Putin would gain the ethnically Russian-speaking areas inside Ukraine to join the Russian sphere of influence, Ukraine would agree not to become a member of NATO. In return, the NATO alliance led by America under Trump would gain Syria in its sphere of influence, and Iran would be denuclearized, but would stay in the Putin sphere, Russian sphere of influence. The American and NATO alliance would also gain Afghanistan after troop withdrawal because the Taliban were backed by Pakistan, which is historically, in its military sense, been a NATO US ally. So that was the arrangement and the deal cut between President Trump and Putin from the top. Subsequent events only verified that. This is all a recap for everybody. Subsequent events only verified that in the voluntary Russian Navy withdrawal from Syria without a fight, in the voluntary Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps withdrawal from Syria without a fight, causing the collapse of the Syrian regime, the protection of Assad in Moscow, and the coming to power of al-Jolani in Syria, who is Saudi allied and being of a Salafi jihadist background, despises the Iranian theocrats who he holds responsible for the civil war in his country. So Jolani, being MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, backed, puts him firmly in the US-NATO alliance camp. Syria went to the US-NATO alliance, Afghanistan likewise, because the Taliban being allied to that other US ally, Pakistan. But Russia keeps Iran and gains what it wants in Ukraine with the ethnic Russian-speaking areas while ensuring Ukraine does not join NATO. That then, once that's in place, leads to the Abraham Accords, and the Abraham Accords will be a reciprocal Arab and Muslim normalization of Israel in return for a Palestinian state, or at least a roadmap towards one. That's how all of this culminates. Israel will come last. That is the grand regional settlement for peace. We are well on our way towards that now. Those of you who've been following for 3 years and more, in fact, since before even the Warrior Creed and Radical Dispatch and Radical Media days, all the way back even before our LBC days to our Quilliam work, will know that the Abraham Peace Accords are something that have been worked on globally for many years. These matters of war and peace are not subject to the whimsical daily musings of individual leaders. And if that's the case, by the way, which it is, by the way, if that's the case, understand something. They will even more so not be subject to the whimsical musings of people like Elon Musk and others. Now, we're going to spend the rest of this stream explaining that with that plan understood, there are some who have a vested interest in opposing that peace because they're warhawks and because they profit from war, and beyond profit because ideologically, those who believe in the globalist technocratic security state can only continue to encroach upon our civil liberties with technocracy in the context of using war and other emergencies as an excuse. Other emergencies such as COVID, for example, we know how that went down. But war is another great excuse for globalist technocrats to expand the reach of the technocratic surveillance state. And Netanyahu, being a key globalist figure, just look at his behavior during COVID as an example, being a key globalist warhawk, has every interest in making sure that war, perma-war, continues. So Netanyahu and his Likudnik Zionist network are at pains to ensure, to undermine Trump's peace, Trump's negotiated peace in the Middle East, and ensure that the Abraham Accords don't happen. So with understanding those two camps, the fact that there are those who are working for peace in power, and there are those in power who are warhawks, the globalists, we will better understand what the warhawks are planning to do to undermine those who are calling for peace. And that's why the topic of today, woke versus warhawk, is as it is, because the idea we're going to present to you with receipts is that the globalists are the same globalists who back the warhawks, and they're the same globalists who back the woke. Essentially, what we're saying to you is globalist technocrats have a vested interest in your radicalization, and they can either radicalize you in the Likudnik Zionist warhawk direction, advocating for and defending against all evidence what is clearly ethnic cleansing and most plausibly genocide in Gaza. More on those definitions in a moment, ethnic cleansing and genocide, via the Lord Chief Justice Jonathan Sumption coming up in this stream. But remember something, globalist technocrats are the ones radicalizing our population, and they're radicalizing them into two opposite directions. Likudnik Zionist warmongering and towards the woke anti-Israel direction. Why? Because by radicalizing these polarizing trends within our societies, they stoke tension and conflict. They hope for communal tension and communal riots and sectarian violence. because it's through that sectarian violence, by backing both the woke and the Warhawks, it's through that sectarian violence that the globalist technocrats in power are able to then expand the reach of their state using counter-terror laws and other such surveillance laws, and they increase in power. They continue to increase in power through conflict. That's the Hegelian dialect. It's problem, reaction, solution. In this instance, the problem is a Warhawk or a woke activist doing things like in the UK, where the woke activists raided RAF bases and vandalized RAF aeroplanes, or indeed the Warhawks defending the ethnic cleansing, most plausibly genocide in Gaza, and in so doing, provide the pretext, as we're going to demonstrate with receipts in this stream, of further and further state overreach. And of course, that benefits the globalist technocrats, and the ongoing communal tensions that they stoke by backing both the woke and the Warhawks. The communal rioting and violence that they stoke also benefits the globalist technocrats, and it allows them to increase their surveillance, and it undermines peace in the Middle East. Why? Because the woke, most known for their pro-Palestine cause, and the Warhawks, most known for their pro-ethnic cleansing in Gaza stance, are both arguing over Muslims and the future of Muslim populations, whether that be in Gaza or in Europe. And so when you understand that, you understand that they have an interest in drumming up anti-Muslim hatred in the West so that they can perpetuate the war in Gaza, just as you need anti-Russian sentiment to continue the war in Ukraine against Putin. You need anti-Muslim sentiment because there aren't many Palestinians in the West, but their most vocal allies are Western Muslims. You need anti-Muslim sentiment to continue your propaganda and allow for Western governments to continue sending funds without opposition to Israel to support Netanyahu's war and ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That's only possible if people hate Muslims. If people humanize Muslims, in this case, Palestinians, but of course, there aren't many Palestinians, especially in the West. There are, of course, Muslims everywhere. If you are able to humanize those who are most vocally in support of the Palestinian cause, it's harder to justify ethnic cleansing and most plausibly genocide against them. So the dehumanization process is part of the propaganda. That's why, for those reasons we've just outlined, globalists are backing a woke versus Warhawk internal hybrid civil war within the West. Now, if you go back to 2022 in January and our episode 1780 with Joe Rogan, censored by Spotify for 3 weeks, all of this was outlined in there in the context of COVID and how they were trying to do it with COVID. And we forecasted in there that they would stoke communal tension and riots revolving around Muslims across Europe for these purposes. It's all there. You can go back and listen to it. Everything we said has transpired step by step. Those of you who are doubting this framework we're putting forward for you right now, continue watching, because we're going to bring you all the receipts that demonstrate that that is what's going on. So first of all, it's why we started by this, that understand what they're trying to stop. They're trying to stop Trump's peace between Muslims and Jews in the Middle East by stoking the flames of sectarian conflict between Muslims and Jews and their supporters in the West. So that's the context, and that's why it's important to understand that Trump, as this Al Arabiya article demonstrates, is pushing for peace in Gaza. It's that peace that they want to undermine. And be in no doubt, Trump is indeed pushing for that peace in Gaza. Here you can see him on his own Truth Social in all caps, as is his style. Make the deal in Gaza. Get the hostages back. DJT, Donald J. Trump. And of course, Trump has stated as much to media as well, as C-SPAN reports here. President Trump on Gaza, we think within the next week, we're going to get a ceasefire. And we're going to show you the video of Trump saying exactly that, where he's working towards a ceasefire in Gaza, just as he did between Israel and Iran.
And I think it's close. I just spoke with some of the people involved. And it's a terrible situation that's going Gaza, he's asking about. And we think within the next week we're going to get a ceasefire. And we're supplying, as you know, a lot of money and a lot of food to that area because we have to. I mean, you have to. We're, in theory, not involved in it, but we're involved because people are dying. And I look at those crowds of people that have no food, no anything, and, you know, we're the ones that are getting it there. Some of it's being taken by some bad people, You know, if you give it and you give it out, and it's supposed to be taking care of the people, and they end up stealing the food and selling it. But we have a pretty good system now. But so we're helping with that. You see the lines of people that just get one meal essentially. But it's too bad other countries aren't helping out. Nobody's helping out. We're doing that because I think we have to on a humanitarian basis. Like this, we didn't have to get involved in Africa, but we did because we thought it was. I mean, I've been reading, like JD said, he's, you know, from much of his life, he's been just seeing this about this brutal war, and it actually got a lot of publicity because of the level of brutality. Right? It was nobody's ever seen anything like it, and to be involved in that, I mean, I consider this the most important of my conferences today. We just had a great Supreme Court victory today, and everybody would say that was big, but you know, we're talking about saving thousands and probably millions of lives here. This is more important than anything. So it's great, but we're working on Gaza, trying to get it taken care of. And again, you know, a lot of food has been sent there, and other countries throughout the world should be helping also.
Now, as well as in Gaza, Trump is also repeating this process, having done so in Iran, now seeking to do so in Gaza, but he's repeating this process in Syria. President Trump's administration has just announced the lifting of many, many years of sanctions on Syria, allowing for that country to begin opening up and trading with the world. That's on your screens now. Just in, Trump admin lifts sanctions on Syria, and there is the White House announcement again on your screens with the relevant part highlighted. This will all be included in tomorrow's write-up of this stream, the Radical Dispatch, provided for free to everybody who goes over to majidnawaz.substack.com, Radical Media on our Substack. So as well as lifting the sanctions on Syria, the Syrian leader al-Jolani has also made this clear. Justin, you can see there, Syria is ready for a security arrangement with Israel. Sources in Damascus tell Israeli outlet N12 that this would be the first step toward a broader peace agreement. So that's the grand regional settlement we're talking about. Even the so-called jihadist leader, former jihadist leader of Syria, is now making peace overtures to Israel. Such a statement would have previously been absolutely unheard of. Take this from us. We have spent all of our lives engaged in the counterterrorism and counter-extremism and Islamism field. Having founded the world's first counter-extremism organization, Quilliam, having worked in the national security area for all of our lives, all of our working lives, for a former jihadist leader now of a nation state to be making peace overtures towards Syria is unprecedented. The reason it's unprecedented is because the last time that happened was in 1981 in Egypt by then Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat. And of course, Anwar al-Sadat was killed by the very al-Qaeda aligned jihadists. Back then, it was, of course, not al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda had not yet been declared to the world. They were known as Tanzim al-Jihad, or the Jihad organization in Egypt, which split later to al-Jihad al-Islami, or Islamic Jihad, and Al-Jama'a al-Islamiyya and Islamic Jihad, then split on to become Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan later on. But the assassination of Anwar al-Sadat in 1981 was by Egyptian jihadists. I was in prison with those who were not executed in that 1981 case. Two of them in particular who were given life sentences because they were junior cadets, as opposed to the generals who were responsible for what was also an attempted military coup coupled with that assassination. Those two, Salah al-Bayoumi and Dr. Tariq, were with me in Mazra'at Torah prison in Egypt, where I spent my 5-year sentence. Take it from us, this is a subject matter we know intimately. For a former jihadist, now leader of a nation state, such as Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as al-Jolani, to be making peace overtures with Israel is truly unprecedented. And if that happens, as you saw on your screens, as part of a regional settlement, that would be part of the Abraham Accords. Syria would join the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia. Now, keep something in mind. We've made this very clear on our previous streams. Saudi Arabia was about to sign up to the Abraham Accords until October the 7th happened. It kind of helps you understand why Netanyahu facilitated October the 7th. Again, we're going to show you the receipts for that in this very stream, because every time we make that claim, we show you the receipts because it sounds so incredulous. But even the domestic head of Israeli intelligence, Shin Bet, is now making these allegations and quit while making these allegations against Netanyahu. We're going to show you in a moment. So understand that the October 7th attacks were facilitated by Netanyahu, by the terrorist group Hamas. Do not mince your words in that regard. The terrorist group Hamas, led by Netanyahu asset Yahya al-Sinwar, the mastermind of the October the 7th attacks. They committed atrocities against civilians, facilitated by Netanyahu so that he could have his pretext for war, which was the subsequent ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Now, likewise, the October 7th attack scuppered Saudi from joining the Abraham Accords back then. Likewise, Trump's peace negotiations with Iran were ongoing, and Netanyahu decided in the middle of those to attack Iran with his missiles. Same pattern. Netanyahu seeks to circumvent the peace through war. It's the same pattern that happened time again. And now, Syria's leader, al-Jolani, is making peace overtures to Israel, saying he wants to join those Abraham Accords. Of course, those who are have vested interests in provoking war will continue to do everything they can to prevent that peace, which repeatedly raises its head in the Middle East, only to be shot down again and again by those who are the Warhawks. But with that context in mind, understand that part of the way in which to prevent that peace is to lobby and influence Western governments, largely those who are behind the peace drive, such as Trump and his administration, by working with the populations of those Western governments to oppose peace, because they're so angry with each other that rather than wanting peace, they want to continue the war. And that's why encouraging the woke versus Warhawk paradigm is in their interests, because by encouraging that communal strife and communal tension, you undermine the peace efforts. If Muslims and Jews and their allies are hating each other in the West, it makes it harder for Western governments to make peace between them in the East. That's the idea. And with that context in mind, it's no surprise that once again, certain agents provocateurs have decided to rock the boat when it comes to pushing the boundaries of the state and speech. And so it's no surprise to us that this happened at Glastonbury in the UK. Police launched a criminal investigation into Bob Vylan and Kneecap's performances at Glastonbury, as the BBC has reported there. Because, of course, the pretext for saying things like, as they did at the Glastonbury, death to the IDF, provides the state with the counter-terror pretext to, again, expand their powers and clamp down. Their aim, whether Bob Vylan or Kneecap realize this or not, is irrelevant. Their aim of the state, that is to use their outbursts to increase their counter-terror powers by clamping down on speech, so that they tarnish all who conscientiously object against Netanyahu's ethnic cleansing in Gaza with the same broad brush as Kneecap and Bob Vylan, that they support death and violence. That's the purpose here, and it's how they're being used. We said it when Kneecap first came out with their support for Hezbollah, for which they too have been charged. We said it back then. Sunni Muslims do not need Kneecap's white savior complex chanting support for the terrorist group Hezbollah, after Hezbollah massacred thousands upon thousands of Sunni Muslim Syrian civilians inside Syria's civil war by siding with the tyrant dictator Assad and the Iranian Axis inside Syria. It is important to understand that there are not simply two sides to global conflict. And the overly simplistic Kneecap and Bob Vylan rhetoric fails to understand that this is a multifaceted global hybrid World War III. And if you simply think that my enemy's enemy is my friend, in other words, those that hate the IDF are my friends, and you start allying with the Iranian theocrats, frankly, you know better. Because the track record of the Iranian theocrats in bringing death, destruction, and murder to civilians is no less than or no better than the track record of Netanyahu. Look at the track record of the Iranian theocrats in Syria, the torture dungeons that were uncovered, the way in which Assad brutally repressed his own people, to understand that that's exactly what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza. And so Kneecap and Bob Vylan are being used. Their support, NICAP in particular's support for Hezbollah, is patronizing to most Muslims on the planet, because 80% of the Muslims on this planet are Sunni Muslims, and the overwhelming majority of Sunni Muslims supported the Syrian Sunni revolutionaries against their dictator Assad. And so, of course, what happened at Glastonbury is part of the woke versus Warhawk framing, so as to allow for the state to come in and reassert its counter-terror powers to clamp down on opposition. And that's why criminal investigations have been launched, but NICAP's already been charged under terror laws for their support for Hezbollah. This is what happened at Glastonbury. Have a look at this now. Actually, before we show you that, first off is the reaction of Reform's former leader, Richard Tice, because Richard Tice, of course, having seen what happened at Glastonbury, fell prey to the woke versus Warhawk stirring the pot by claiming that NICAP and Bob Villan, in particular, Bob Villan, were chanting against Jews per se. This is what Richard Tice said. It's on your screens. Kind and compassionate folk at Glastonbury chanting to kill Jews, appalling anti-Semitism and racism. Against anyone else, this would have been a national outrage with calls to arrest folk. Two-tier justice under two-tier Keir. Silence from the BBC. Now, of course, that's a response to Lucy Brown, former activist on the, what can we say, on the stage name Tommy Robinson Likudnik Zionist-backed scene, continuing her role here to stoke tension. In all my years skirting the fringes of right-wing groups, I've never once been at a meeting or rally where a crowd openly chanted death to anyone, let alone thousands screaming it in unison. We're going to show you that video, but before we do, here's our response to Tice and Lucy. They are not chanting kill the Jews. As you can hear yourself, they are chanting death to the IDF, the Israeli military that is currently and most plausibly engaged in genocide. Just as Netanyahu is not Israel, Israel is not Judaism. To make all Jews responsible for the actions of the IDF, as you imply, would actually be anti-Semitic. Now, before we finish reading that, we're going to show you the video and then come back to that slide we just showed you. But here is Bob Villan chanting death to the IDF at Glastonbury. Clever using the inshallah phrase there. I mean, ultimately, I'm not so sure that Muslims on the Sunni side would be so supportive of what is clearly an Iranian theocrat-inspired chant. It's the Iranian theocrats who chant death to Israel and death to America. Death to the IDF is a spin-off of that chant. Bob Villan and NICAP need to understand, in particular NICAP's previous endorsement of Hezbollah, they need to understand that they are being used by the very same globalists who are backing both the Warhawks and phenomena such as these in order to stir communal and sectarian violence for the pretext of expanding the powers of the security state, thereby aiding their desired globalist technocracy. That's why NICAP were charged under terror laws. That's why Bob Villan is also being looked at under those same terror laws as well. But coming back to our response to Richard Tice, Richard, we said very clearly to Tice's mischaracterization, because it's still important to be, disagree as we may with how NICAP and Bob Villan are being used. It's important to understand and be accurate here, understand what exactly is going on. So we said to Tice, remember, this is Richard Tice of the Reform Party. We do wish that Reform paid a bit more attention to us on foreign policy. That's what we're going to say for this stage. If it carries on like this, Richard, we're going to have to get a bit more harsh. But for the moment, we're just going to say politely, we do wish that you paid a bit more attention to us on foreign policy, as we wish Isabel, your partner, paid a bit more attention to us on the Midazolam story. This is a gentle nudge to remind you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to foreign policy, Richard. They did not say kill the IDF, kill the Jews, sorry. They said kill the IDF. And we can continue now to read here. As you can hear yourself, they are chanting death to the IDF, the Israeli military that is currently and most plausibly engaged in genocide. Just as Netanyahu is not Israel, Israel is not Judaism. To make all Jews responsible for the actions of the IDF, as you imply, would actually be anti-Semitic. Anyhow, do you think that such a sentiment among the youth of today may have anything at all to do with this? And the this we're referring to is Lord Chief Justice Jonathan Sumption speaking to our former colleague Matt Fry, who used to work with us at LBC, asking him whether or not he thinks what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza is a genocide. The Lord Chief Justice, former head of our UK Supreme Court, said it most certainly is ethnic cleansing, and that the most plausible explanation he can give for what Netanyahu is doing is genocide. So, Richard Tice of the Reform Party, do you think that perhaps the fact that there's a most plausible genocide going on in Gaza may be why our youth are susceptible to becoming radicalized and saying things like death to the IDF? Perhaps if we focused on the actual plausible genocide rather than getting our knickers in a twist about punk rap bands, perhaps we might address the root of the problem, as Lord Jonathan Sumption has made very clear. Take a look at this.
There are clear rules against genocide, and genocide is becoming an increasingly plausible explanation of what is now happening in Gaza, because there have been statements by Netanyahu to committees of the Knesset, which suggest that the object of the campaign that's been in progress since the 16th of May is to encourage large-scale emigration of the population of Gaza to neighboring countries, other, of course, than Israel itself, by killing them and starving them.
Let me ask the question very clearly and simply then. Is genocide taking place in Gaza, as far as you're concerned?
I think all I'm prepared to say at the moment is that that is the most plausible explanation of what is happening. Obviously, a great deal more investigation will be necessary before one can say that the position is entirely clear.
Is ethnic cleansing taking place in Gaza?
It looks like that, does it not?
And the Israelis, of course, would say they're doing this and they are targeting hospitals and schools, even though they don't want to, per se, because that's where Hamas is hiding and that's where they're using Palestinian civilians as human shields.
There is a good deal of evidence that Hamas does site its facilities underneath places that are less vulnerable to Israeli attacks. But, I mean, frankly, that is too bad. Beyond a point, you cannot simply destroy unlimited numbers of lives to achieve a military objective. The gross breaches of international humanitarian law, which are currently happening in Gaza.
Let's talk about these breaches. What kind of breaches, as a lawyer, are you seeing there?
Well, first of all, there is a general principle which is enshrined in the Geneva Conventions of 1949 that you cannot attack even legitimate military targets if that would produce a disproportionate casualties among civilians. It seems to me to be clear that attacks on hospitals and schools full of sick patients or children on the grounds that there's a Hamas command center underneath them are disproportionate. This is killing on an indiscriminate scale.
Why has it taken so long for a letter like this to be written and signed by you?
Well, there was an earlier letter which I also signed 18 months or so ago. Since then, a great deal more has happened, and since May the 16th of this year, an intensification of the fight against the Gazans, and also a shift in the justification which Israel is using to defend itself.
Now, that was the former Lord Chief Justice, head of our Supreme Court. He still is a Lord, but former head of our Supreme Court, Jonathan Sumption, who, by the way, look at his track record on COVID mandates, opposed those too. Now saying very clearly with his legal hat on that this is most plausibly genocide and is actually certainly ethnic cleansing in Gaza. So we put the question again to people like Richard Tice, who attempted to mischaracterize the useful idiot Bob Villan and Kneecap's radicalized remarks as being against all Jews. Clearly they weren't. But do remember that to cast it as a Jews versus everybody plays into the woke versus Warhawk framing that they are seeking, so that they can maximize communal tension by making it existential fight for the Jews against the existential fight for the survival of Muslims in Europe. When those two groups feel that they're fighting existentially, you end up with civil war. That's the point. Richard Tice needs to take heed. Again, we'll ask nicely this time. He needs to pay a bit more attention to what we're saying about what's going on. He has a track record now in the Ukraine war as well, supporting that. And we again noticed egging on Israel and Netanyahu during the Iran strikes, while even President Trump was seeking to reconcile them, but rather certain voices in reform at the very top, pushing instead for escalation. We're asking you all to be very careful here, because you're playing with World War III. This is what we do for a living. So coming back to the topic, we make it very clear that our moral compass is being deliberately distracted. Re-steer your moral compass. It's gotten distracted. You should be more focused on the current and real ethnic cleansing in Gaza than on what spoiled middle-class little brats chant at Glastonbury. Clearly, what's going on in Gaza, as explained there by Lord Chief Justice Sumption, is ethnic cleansing and most plausibly genocide. And just to make it very clear for everybody, because of course people do like to reduce one's argument to its worst possible interpretation, again, in the context of a woke versus Warhawk civil war that's being encouraged, so as to cast us in either one or the other camp. So just to be very clear, we've posted this publicly. We're saying it again in this stream, just so that everybody remains in no doubt. We don't support Kneecap or Bob Villain. That's on your screens right now. But supporting what is most plausibly genocide in Gaza is even more insane. That was in response to us responding to somebody saying, calling for the death of anyone at a music festival is insane. His little skit about his Jewish ex-boss suggests he's brazenly anti-Semitic. It's grim. And we've said yes, which is why I don't support Kneecap or Bob Villain, but supporting what is most plausibly genocide in Gaza is even more insane. We've lost our moral compass. We're being distracted so that we get stuck in the trenches arguing woke versus Warhawk. Is it right or wrong? Is it free speech or not to chant death to the IDF from a stage? Meanwhile, an actual real world, most plausible genocide is going on in Gaza, and we're busy arguing on the street corners with the Warhawks, because the woke versus Warhawk framing is ideal for perpetuating civil, communal, sectarian strife. And if you can't get peace between Muslims and Jews in Europe and the West, you won't get it in the Middle East, because that translates to government policy. That's how it's playing out. That's the intention. And we explain it here in these words on your screen now. Warning, your reaction is the point. This is woke versus Warhawk. Punk rap bands like Kneecap and Bob Villain are being used, whether they know it or not, to start fires so that their Warhawk adversaries have the pretext to call in the fire brigade and simply douse your entire flame of conscientious objection to ongoing ethnic cleansing that is most plausibly genocide, referenced Lord Chief Justice Sumption, in Gaza. It has now been proven that October the 7th was that too, with Yahya Sinwar acting as the asset. The only way to win is not to play. Protect the peace. So we're coming to October the 7th in a moment to demonstrate how that too was used in order to further facilitate Netanyahu's war ambitions. But for the moment, on what we've just said there, the woke versus Warhawk framing, the entire point of these stunts, such as Kneecap stunt, keep in mind, it's not lost on us that they had a movie made about them only a few weeks before that stunt about Hezbollah. This is clearly an operation, folks. If you can't see it, I don't know what we can say to you. That movie called Kneecap, which I've watched, was funded by the Film Council. Right? They had a state-funded movie made about them. Suddenly they're calling support for Hezbollah on the stage, which, by the way, 80% of the world's Muslims are Sunni Muslims. The overwhelming majority of Sunni Muslims despise Hezbollah because they massacred Sunni Muslims in Syria in support of the Iranian theocrats. Kneecap, you're interfering in shit you simply don't understand. Shut up. Likewise, Bob Villain. I mean, his ideal, the image presented on stage, it intimidates those middle-class people that go to Glastonbury thinking this is what street cred is, supporting people like this. At the end of the day, Bob Villain is not somebody that comes from our community, does not understand the dynamics at play here, and is, again, likewise encouraging your worst impulses for the purposes of the woke versus Warhawk framing. Why? Because the point is your reaction to back one or the other, so that the state has the perfect reason to get involved and increase their national security state. Somebody asked us, well, how do we not play, Majid? You said the only way to win is not to play. What does not to play mean in literal terms? Well, we've said above there, not engaging in any behavior that will obviously be weaponized by those in power as a reason for why further state overreach is needed to control the dissent, because that is exactly what's happening. Look at this BBC headline here. Kneecap member charged with terror offense. It is exactly what they want so that they can expand the terror laws and start clamping down on speech and start associating people like us, like Lord Sumption, anyone that speaks out in defense of the Palestinians. Oh, look, you're a bunch of terrorists. That's how the media narrative is playing. They're all a bunch of terror supporters. They're even trying to typecast the keffiyeh, the Palestinian scarf, and the Palestinian national flag somehow as terrorist symbols, just because Hamas, also being Palestinian, sometimes wear those scarves, when actually they're the national scarf of the people that Hamas appropriated. The red one was Jordanian. The black and white one was on the west of the river Jordan, that is, which is the West Bank. So, of course, you see there, NECAP got charged, but it wasn't just NECAP that got charged with terror offences. As NPR reports on your screens now, after Glastonbury, Bob Villan faces UK criminal investigation and US visa revocation as well. Now, at this stage, we've been addressing the woke and how they're being used as useful idiots. We want to say a bit about the Warhawks on the other side as well, because, by the way, we know very well, some of you listening to this stream or watching this stream or reading the written dispatch on this stream, some of you will fall into one of these camps because you keep falling for the psyops. We've had such messages coming from people who claim to be previous supporters saying, Majid, you've lost it on this one. If we had a penny for every time somebody wrote online over the course of the last 5 years saying, you've lost it on this one, I support you, but on this one, you've lost it, we'd be billionaires by now. The fact is that just as the woke are being used, you Warhawk supporters are also being used. Who remembers Lucy Connolly? Now, you can't, before we show you this, you can't scream on and on about free speech, right? In Lucy Connolly's case, saying that Keir Starmer is imprisoning and jailing people for speech, while you then, in the same breath, demand that the counter-terror police go after Bob Villan and NECAP. Listen to your own hypocrisy. And then you might argue, yeah, but in Lucy Connolly's case, it was just a woman tweeting, these guys are calling for death, violence, and destruction. No, not so fast. It's the other way around. The actual real death, violence, and destruction was caused by the national riots in the UK, where a mosque was lynched in Southport and 2 asylum hotels were burned down with human beings inside them. That's what Lucy Connolly encouraged explicitly before it happened. As this BBC headline says, how one woman's racist tweet sparked a free speech row. Look at the text in that article. Rupert Lowe, the independent MP for Great Yarmouth, said the situation was morally repugnant, external, and added, this is not the Britain I want to live in. Others said her supporters wanted a right to be racist. In July last year, prompted by a false rumor that an illegal immigrant was responsible for the murder of 3 girls at a dance workshop in Southport, Lucy Connolly posted online calling for mass deportation now, adding, set fire to all the hotels for all I care. She then said, if that makes me a racist, so be it. Well, after Lucy Connolly posted, remember, the numbers are here, right? It was viewed 310,000 times. After Lucy Connolly posted to 310,000 people, set fire to the hotels, some people set fire to the hotels, 2 of them, with humans inside them. Now, we don't frankly give a shit what you think of asylum seekers or immigrants. If there are human beings inside a building, you don't set fire to it. Lucy Connolly was sent to jail for inciting hatred and violence. Now, you're going to step back and take a view, please, that is consistent here with between the cases of Lucy Connolly and the case of Bob Villan and NECAP. Where do you stand? Is it for free speech even when it encourages violence? In which case you're going to accept Bob Villan and NECAP and what they said. Because all of you lot on the Warhawk side are championing Lucy Connolly as some hero of free speech. Even JD Bloody Vance came to Europe talking about how Keir Starmer's imprisoning people for tweets. It's all bullshit. It's all a psyop. Lucy Connolly was arrested and charged for inciting violence and hatred because she said set fire to the hotels, which is a direct encouragement, after which hotels were set fire to them. This was a lynching of asylum seekers in hotels, literally a lynch mob like used to go around in the South burning down crosses and hanging black people like strange fruits from trees. Lucy Connolly was arrested and charged and imprisoned for the direct incitement to violence. Now, if you don't agree with that, I don't mind. Take a consistent view. Either support Lucy Connolly in her speech encouraging violence and support Bob Villan and NECAP, or don't support either. But you cannot have it both ways. But the woke versus Warhawk framing wants you to have it both ways. It wants you to support Lucy Connolly as a Warhawk while decrying the wokists doing the same thing, and vice versa. Our line is clear. Free speech, but if you incite violence, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences legally of inciting violence, especially where it can be proven that that directly led to the exact same violence that you were encouraging 310,000 people to do online. That's a consistent view. Most of you don't have that consistent view, which is part of the problem. Richard Tice, you don't have that consistent view, do you? If you do, then understand something, that's why it's important that you're to be very clear, you're being used. You are being goaded into impulsive overreactions on the side that suits your biases. So if it's on the right, you're going to support Lucy Connolly and decry Bob Villan and Kneecap. If it's on the left, you're going to support Bob Villan and Kneecap and decry Lucy Connolly as a racist, when in principle they've both done the same thing. But principles don't matter, because it's precisely that intransigence that globalists seek to encourage to provoke the communal rioting, as already happened in the UK with the national riots over things like Lucy Connolly's tweet. That is the woke versus Warhawk plan. And of course, Rupert Lowe backed Lucy Connolly, and it's no surprise then that that same Rupert Lowe is engaging in a transparently open backing of the woke versus Warhawk narrative. How? We started in this stream by saying that this entire framing was to undermine Trump's peace in the Middle East. Well, the equivalent of Trump in the UK, the consistently anti-war candidate, has been Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe has just this week declared setting up another new party. So first under bloody Lawrence Fox, it was Reclaim. And now under Rupert Lowe, as you can see on your screens now, he's setting up something else to challenge reform. And he's calling it, what is he calling it? Restore. So bloody Lawrence Fox sets up Reclaim, and now Rupert Lowe sets up Restore, both in an attempt to undermine reform, which is led by Nigel Farage, Trump ally, the only repeatedly anti-war politician in the UK on a national level. To actually stand a chance of becoming prime minister. So Rupert Lowe, of course, that's no insult to George Galloway there. We voted for Workers' Party, George, as you know. Our response to Rupert Lowe announcing that he's joining this woke versus Warhawk culture war is this. This is a transparent attempt by Rupert Lowe to split the Reform Party vote on the right after he was expelled from Reform for throwing a hissy fit after not succeeding in steering reform in the direction of dividing British communities from within along sectarian identity lines. It will attract the usual rogues gallery of stage name Tommy Robinson supporting Likudnik-backed mass deportation advocates, and it will fail. This is Rupert Lowe announcing setting up an entity seeking to split the reform vote himself here on his page. Today, we are launching Restore Britain, a movement for those who believe that we need to fundamentally change the way Britain is governed. I thought that was Reform Party's job. It's a clear split the vote initiative, even with the prefix, so that people get confused at the ballot box as to whether they're voting Reform, Reclaim, Restore. To continue reading from Rupert Lowe, we will build a policy platform together. A movement will be created together. A path will be forged together. This is because he's upset that reform is being run by a chairman, Zia Youssef, and a leader, Nigel Farage. And because they didn't listen to him, he's calling it a dictatorship. So he keeps emphasizing the together word there. To carry on reading from Rupert Lowe, this is not a political party, but a fundamentally different way of doing things. Members from political parties are very welcome to join us on this journey if they share our values and want to be part of a bottom-up movement that has the potential to transform Britain. I do not have all the answers. I'm not a politician, says a member of parliament. I am not a politician. I find myself in parliament, independent and isolated without a party. But strangely, during my time in politics, I've never felt more part of a team. There are good, talented, dedicated people all over the country who are tired of petty Westminster politics. Now is not the time for another political party. It is our job to bring people together, providing a vehicle that can deliver the radical restoration that is required. But I need your help. Restore Britain will be built on a very different model. As a member of Restore Britain, you will have the opportunity to vote on the policies and principles that you believe in. With this data, we will put pressure on the government and other political parties to recognize and act on the will of the British people. So in other words, he's creating an attempt to outflank reform on the right by suggesting through this process of a membership-based voting system, policies that will pressure Farage and Reform to keep drifting further and further to the xenophobic right. And we know that because of what he stands for. For example, as you saw in that Lucy Connolly BBC article reported 25th of May, Rupert Lowe, the independent MP for Great Yarmouth, said the situation was morally repugnant that Lucy Connolly was in jail after she literally posted torch asylum hotels and then 2 were torched. And that guy's sticking up for her. This is his want. It's what he supports. And Rupert Lowe joining the woke versus Warhawk framing on the Warhawk side, on the anti-Muslim pro-Likudnik backed network, is only further facilitating this woke versus Warhawk framing that we're presenting to you. And it's no surprise then that one of their first policies, Rupert Lowe's new outfit's first policies, was the very suggestion that caused a huge rift in reform recently between its chairman, Zia Yusuf, and one of its new MPs. And that was this out of the blue and impractical suggestion to ban the burqa. As you can see on your screens now, Restore Britain wants to ban the burqa. That was posted by them on their new official page, and we've responded to that. And the fact that out of all the major global and domestic policy issues to pick from, one of their first ever policy announcements is the below only further goes to prove the point being woke versus Warhawk. Their entire point is to stir up sectarian division, exactly as Kneecap and Bob Villan just did at Glastonbury. Woke versus Warhawk. Now, with that in mind, it's no surprise for you, those of you who've been following Warrior Creed and the Radical Dispatch for weeks and months, you will not be surprised by this, that Elon Musk has jumped in backing Rupert Lowe's new communal and sectarian platform. As GB Politics reports there, Elon Musk expresses support for Rupert Lowe's new political movement. And there you can see Elon Musk's tweet replying to Rupert Lowe with 2 British Union flags. Now, remember, that's the same Musk that we've said, look at this globalist, technocratic, surveillance state plotter, Elon Musk, against real Donald Trump. Musk wants to cut the state so these tech corporate PayPal baby mafia mates, such as Palantir's Peter Thiel, can rule you, not to reduce the actual deficit. His plan is failing, and it will fail. Because that's the same Elon Musk who, having just backed Rupert Lowe, has, in the state side, has pledged to undermine President Trump in the following way. Look at this. Elon Musk has vowed to primary every Republican who votes for Trump's big, beautiful bill and launch a new political party called the America Party if Trump's bill passes. So let's get this straight. Elon Musk is backing anyone that opposes Trump's bill, is backing candidates who oppose Trump's bill in the primaries in the US against Trump, and in the UK, he's backing rebels against Nigel Farage. Now, those of you who've been watching and following regularly will know that we've long said Elon Musk is in the Likudnik pro-Warhawk Netanyahu camp owned by Netanyahu. Elon Musk's previous attempted coup against Farage by backing Lowe failed. His previous attempted coup against Trump by claiming he was on the Epstein's list failed to such an extent that Musk had to delete the post. But now he's back again, this time using his money, offering funding to those that opposed Trump in the primaries in the US and backing a Nigel Farage opponent here in the UK. So it's very clear, the woke versus Warhawk framework, the division that is being provoked will be backed up by money to fund candidates who ride the wave of that division to undermine Trump and, in the UK context, the next Prime Minister, Farage, because they are both anti-war in principle and have a proven track record over many years of being anti-war. To such an extent that Musk has even pledged funding to Thomas Massey. Again, you might think, Well, why is Musk, if you're saying Majid Musk is a pro-Netanyahu, pro-Likudnik, globalist technocrat candidate, why is he backing Masih, who appears to be anti-Israel? If you understand the woke versus Warhawk framing, you'll understand that both sides will be supported, the woke anti-Israel side and the Warhawk side, because the purpose is to create as much division and rancor as possible so as to undermine the Trump administration. If you do not get peace with Muslims and Jews in America, it's harder for Trump to negotiate that peace between Muslims and Jews abroad, because of course he needs the government with him in that pursuit. And the more civil strife you have domestically between Muslims and Jews, the harder to create the peace abroad between Muslims and Jews, because Trump needs that mandate of peace to be able to do so. And if you undermine that mandate by creating conflict between Muslims and Jews domestically, he cannot carry that momentum to create the peace abroad. Likewise with Farage in the UK. And it's why you'll find that Musk is continuously and repeatedly backing candidates, whether they're in Masih's case anti-Israel or in Rupert Lowe's case anti-Muslim, anti-Islam. Woke versus Warhawk, both ends. He's backing both ends because the purpose is the division. That's the point. It is to undermine the peace that President Trump is working hard to bring about. It is something which clearly by now is on Trump's radar. And here is Trump being asked about it just today. Donald Trump answering a question on possibly deporting Elon Musk as their feud grows into intensity. Trump said, I don't know. We'll have to take a look. But have a listen to what else he says in that video. This issue is certainly on Trump's radar.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem. It blows up, you know?
That was President Trump commenting on his concerns around Elon Musk's desire for electric cars. It's all technocracy. Keep in mind how people allowed for somebody who catapulted into the world's richest published billionaire off the back of COVID mandates. In other words, the money was laundered from the people to the billionaires. How people think that he's your people's champion, it's absurd. The guy believes in electric vehicles and net zero policies. The guy is allied to China. The guy got rich off the back of you all being locked in and mandated during COVID. The transfer of wealth that occurred went to Tesla as they attempted to transfer our societies away from fossil fuels and onto their grid. He is a technocrat, and Trump is well aware of that, which is why, probably jokingly, he threatened to deport him, but probably not jokingly, said he's going to set Doge, or the Department of Government Efficiency, onto Musk. But Musk, either way, is in trouble. And we summarize this whole woke versus Warhawk paradigm for you in the following words. Because of what's going on in New York right now is a perfect example of the paradigm we're saying to you is at play here, the woke versus Warhawk paradigm. And we'll read it for you. The DNC, the Democratic National Convention, just elected, the party at least, just elected a self-described Muslim socialist, woke young dude, Zohran Mamdani, as their mayoral candidate in New York City, which means he could very well likely be the next NYC mayor. He looks like he graduated from the Obama School of Political Smarm, combined with the BLM School of Political Operations. His father appears, however, to have been a good man. Zohran is a Ugandan Indian American. He is effectively a Shiite Muslim Corbyn who will be unleashed on New York City, replete with all his defund the police woke activism being torpedoed to office off the back of legitimate sympathy for Gaza and a misguided anti-Trump sentiment that is peculiar to New York City. Yes, his being a Shia Muslim and being of East African Indian is highly relevant as identities, whether he knows this or not. In the context of this operation, after what just happened with Iran and Israel, keep in mind, Zohran Mamdani is a Shia American Muslim. Iran is a Shia theocratic state. It's a perfect operation to stoke the woke versus Warhawk paradigm in the upcoming New York mayoral elections. To continue reading, Mamdani, he is being accused with some evidence by the dark twin of this operation, the Warhawk Likudnik Zionists, of having sang the praises of Hamas in his previous career as a woke type nerd Backstreet Boys brown pop rapper who was not that good. The ingredients are all there for it to kick off like a powder keg. NYC's pro-Hamas DNC wokists versus NYC's pro-Netanyahu big finance neocons. Woke versus Warhawk. This causes real-world chaos, televised anti-Semitism, and anti-Muslim hate popularized, combined, and amplified by globalist tech bros. The aim? The house always wins. Sectarian anti-Muslim and anti-Jew hatred, televised globally as a way for big finance globalists in New York City to wreck Trump's Middle East peace between Muslims and Jews so that they don't lose their military-industrial globalist war machine. Protect the peace. Do not worry, their plan is failing and it will fail. We're going to play you a clip here by another candidate for New York's mayor who runs almost every time and doesn't win, but nevertheless speaks some sense here. Curtis Silva, the founder of the Guardian Angels, on the woke Mamdani Democratic candidate in New York City for mayor.
If we can pull up some of his proposals here, you got freeze the rent, city-run grocery stores, $70 billion worth of debt to fund affordable housing, free buses, no-cost childcare, baby baskets to newborns, $30 minimum wage, a few more not on this list here, defund NYPD, defund prisons, defund medical bills, and get rid of private insurance. Your thoughts?
But in typical political fashion, do as I say, not as I do. He claims he's under threat, right? So who's protecting him now? Off-duty NYPD armed officers. Who does he want protecting New Yorkers? Social workers. Yeah. Hey, Mamdani, do what you suggest everybody do. Why isn't he being protected by social workers? I'm a guy who was shot 5 times by the Gattis and Gambinos in 1992. I travel by myself. I'm in the streets. I'm in the subways. I'm the people's mayor. You have to have a feel. You know, I hate to break the baby boomers' bubble, because I'm a baby boomer. The millennials are the majority now. Do the analytics. You must get millennials on your side to win elections. I've been working with young people my whole life as leader of the Guardian Angels here and in 13 countries and 130 cities around the world. You need to be able to motivate people. Look, fault him as you will. You keep throwing stuff at him, you just strengthen him with millennials. We have to bring the millennials to us. Wasn't Trump able to do that with male millennials? Yep. And that probably was part of his pathway to victory. We have to start doing that now in New York City, and I'm the only one to do that. We're in this mess now. Why? Because Eric Adams failed as a mayor, or he would have been the Democratic nominee seeking re-election.
But the stage is set. In New York, the Mamdani, the woke, clearly in some cases, even pro-Hamas activism mayoral candidate, has won the Democratic primaries. And what will play out now in New York City's mayoral race is the woke versus Warhawk debate. You're pro-terrorism and therefore you're pro-Palestine and therefore pro-terrorism, or you're pro-Israel and therefore pro-ethnic cleansing and genocide. And that becomes a very heated and divisive debate. That is the plan. And you stoke that tension by focusing exclusively on the culture wars, which is why all the Likudnik Zionist assets have been instructed to focus on how Islam does not belong in the West. It's to stoke the woke versus Warhawk narrative. So it's no surprise to us again that you see Charlie Kirk with admitted Mossad operative and asset Gad Saad focusing on how Islam does not belong in the West and conflating extremism with normative everyday Islam. Before we read our reaction to it, we're going to play you the clip. Here's Charlie Kirk with Gad Saad, who is a known and admitted, self-confessed Mossad asset.
Is compatible with Western civilization?
The short answer, no. Of course, millions of Muslims decide to ignore the incongruent.
So the question again, remember there, is Islam compatible with Western civilization? He begins by saying no, and then he explains why. We'll start again now.
Is compatible with Western civilization?
The short answer, no. Of course, millions of Muslims decide to ignore the the incongruent elements of their religion. They're practicing cafeteria Islam, right? They're choosing the parts that they agree with, and they're ignoring the parts that they don't agree with. But once Islam becomes, never mind a majority, if it becomes a strong minority, we have 1400 years of history that tells us what happens to all of the foundational values that we hold dearly in the West, right? I mean, you don't have to, believe me, you could just study history, right? I mean, almost every single one of the 56 countries that I mentioned a few minutes ago started off with having zero Islam. And then you close and open your eyes, suddenly it's 99.9% Islam. How did that happen? In some cases, it takes 5 years for it to happen. In some cases, it takes 500 years to happen. But inshallah, it will always happen. I'll mention one other thing. Many of your viewers may not know this. Since 9/11 alone, Charlie, so that's 24 years, there have been 47,000 plus terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists in nearly 70 countries. And now there are multiple databases that you can use to prove that this number is correct. 47,000 terror attacks. So that should give you a sense of whether Islam is compatible with the West or not.
So why is it that so many Muslims are moving to Western countries? Is it just economics, or is there something more ideological at play here?
It's both. Of course, many Muslims have no interest in conquering anyone, and they want, as you just said, exactly what you said, which is, I want better economic opportunities for me and my children and so on. But the Muslim Brotherhood and many other Islamic theorists and scholars and politicians have said that we will conquer the West through three means. And I hope that your listeners and viewers take note. Number one, we will conquer the West through the womb of our women, right? So that's a demographic fertility battle. We will produce 5 children, you will produce 1.2 children, and we will outbreed you. Number two, we will conquer the West through hijrah. Hijrah is the Arabic word for immigration, and that's exactly what we do with our open border policies. And number three, we will conquer the West by using your miserable freedoms and liberties against you. They're screaming this out from the top of the mountain, and yet most Westerners choose to ignore it, Charlie. It is so galling. It is so frustrating. I escaped that world 45 plus years ago, and here it is now hunting me down 50 years later.
Now, aside from the fact that it hasn't escaped our notice that Charlie Kirk has also jumped on the woke versus Warhawk anti-Islam pro-Likudnik Zionist warmongering propaganda, for which we did warn Charlie Kirk publicly online that if he continues in this way, then he's going to go the way of Lawrence Fox and all the others. Father Calvin Robinson, remember those guys who attempted to do this? Stage name Tommy Robinson, likewise Rupert Lowe. This is a failing enterprise in the US. Elon Musk attempted to do this by backing it in Europe as well. This character, Gard Saad, who Charlie Kirk has just got on here, is a self-confessed Mossad asset. We're going to show you that in a moment. But before we do, it's suffice to say that what he said in that video is simply bullshit. Egypt, to take a famous example of a Muslim majority country, is still till this day 20% Christian. To take another example, perhaps closer to Mr. Saad's heart, and that is Palestine, till this day, there are huge Christian communities in Palestine. And if you speak to them, they're more upset about the fact that Israel is invading their lands than they are about their Palestinian Muslim neighbors. Throughout the West Bank, look to Bethlehem, Bethlehem, it's full of Palestinian Christians. And you can go through the countries, even take a country like India. Pre-partition in 1947, pre-British Raj, India was ruled by the Muslim Mughal emperor and the empire, the Mughal Empire. And of course, the fact that there are over 1 billion Hindus till today in India, they didn't just emerge after India was created in 1947. They were there all through the British Empire because they were there all through the Mughal Empire, because the Mughal Muslim rulers of India did not forcibly convert the Hindus, and they were the majority in India. What Mr. Gadsad said there in that video is simply bullshit, but he doesn't care that it's bullshit because his aim is to hoodwink Western populations who don't know much about Islam into hating Muslims so that the woke versus Warhawk narrative can be perpetuated. And of course, our response we're going to read to you, which we published when we saw that video. This tired old reductionist and shallow insistence that Islam in its essence is a threat to the West has become a transparent way to identify Likudnik Zionist warmongers who have been instructed to stoke divide and conquer narratives upon Western societies. This is motivated by their fear of losing Israel's privileged influence over US foreign policy to people like those American Muslims who ensured a Trump victory in swing state Michigan. Who remembers that? President Trump thanked the Muslim voters of Michigan for taking him over the line in that key swing state of Michigan. He did not thank the Jewish voters. He did thank the Muslim voters. It's what people like Mr. Gadsad are upset about. To continue reading, third paragraph down, ironically, for these Likudnik Zionists, their fear of Israel losing influence is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy due to their manner and insufferable neurosis about Israel losing influence. Ever wonder why they all dote over Netanyahu's war? While they speak of Islam in such generalized and unnuanced ways that if repeated about their own identities, they'd loudly shriek hate. They all have one boss, Netanyahu. To demonstrate that, we're now going to show you how that same Mr. Gadsad character on that Charlie Kirk character show, both of whom have publicly already stated whether or not, questioned whether or not Muslims have any place in the West, which you'd be forgiven for assuming means they would like the Gaza treatment to be meted out on Western Muslims as well. But that Gadsad character is a self-confessed Mossad asset. And here he is, Dr. Simon Goddick, saying, just a quick reminder that Gadsad was trying to drag the US into war with Iran, openly admitted to working with Mossad. If you think Ben Shapiro, the Mark Levin Show, Alan Dershowitz, and Dave Rubin aren't part of the same network, you probably still believe CNN tells the truth. But here is Gadsad, who you just heard there in his screed against Islam and Muslims in the West, admitting that he's a Mossad asset.
Didn't believe it in the book. You let the cat out of the bag. You're actually a Mossad agent.
Oh, you are the first person on my media tour to actually either have read that far into the book or to mention it. I thought it would be the top story in every show.
This is serious. This is serious stuff. And most people, they're not as candid about this stuff,
I thought that maybe I had extended the statute of limitation, that they won't come after me at this point. Do you want me to tell that story?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that actually is something that I discuss in the chapter on play, the importance of, living your life with a playful mindset. Now you might say, how does the Mossad fit with play? Well, so when I was about 18 years old, I had a cousin who had come from Israel who said, hey, I have a friend of mine who would like to meet you, to chat with you. I'm thinking, for what purpose? So, he'll talk to you. So I meet this gentleman. He says, there are some guys who would like to meet you and see if you're interested in working with them. And so I meet these gentlemen who don't introduce themselves as being Mossad agents or whatever. They say, we're interested in checking the quality of our security in various environments. Would you be interested in being the person who does some of these tests for us? I said, okay, tell me more. So the first mission that I went on was I was asked to go to an El Al office in downtown Montreal, walk in there. Everything was scripted. They told me exactly what to do. Walk in with a bag, ask some questions, then take the bag, leave it there, and end up leaving without taking the bag.
Did you actually look in the bag before
I did not look in the bag. I'd like
Very
to think that
trusting
there weren't any bombs. And so I did that, and then security person came, you forgot your bag, and so on. So the test was done successfully. I don't remember exactly how long after. A couple of weeks later, they asked to meet me again. They said, we have a more challenging mission for you. You are now a student at think it was University of Montreal. It's a fake story that they're asking me to play a role. You're working on a paper, whatever, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You'd like to interview the Israeli consul in Montreal. And what we're going to do is in your glove, Montreal is a very cold place. In your gloves, there's going to be a fake gun. And the idea is to then see if they catch. Now, this one was a lot more elaborate in that there were multiple layers of security. And in the final layer, if I can get through all of the different things, there would be a very detailed pat down. And I remember telling them, but what if he finds the gun, the fake gun? I said, don't worry, we're behind this. Like, it's secure. And so I go through all the stages. The guy, and I noticed that he's getting stressed. They ask him to stop. Now they're very happy because they're, in a sense, I don't have confirmation of this, but I think it was 2 tests that were happening. Test 1 is literally the security. Test 2 is this guy, someone that is worthy to keep working with him. Because, and again, I'm speculating here, but I think it's on solid ground. I'm kind of the dream of the Mossad and associated agencies, because I'm the Lebanese Jew who's a perfect Arabic speaker who left Lebanon. The most famous case in the Israeli spy game is someone named Eli Cohen, who was executed by the Syrians, having infiltrated the highest ranks of Syrian society, who, because he was a perfect Arabic speaker, was able to infiltrate the high society of Syria. And so I can't know for sure that that's where I was heading, but it certainly seemed as though they were testing me. And then there was a third mission, which apparently I was told I shouldn't speak too much about it based on the legal review of my book from my publisher, but where I was going to go on a third mission that kind of raised the stakes of what I was being tested on. And as I tell in the book, what ended it is something that the Mossad is apparently very afraid of, and that's the angry Jewish mother. And so apparently my mother found out, and the only way that she could have found out, by the way, because I never told anybody. I didn't even tell anybody these stories for something like 25 years after the fact. It might have well been my now wife who first, maybe I was trying to impress her when we were going out on our first courtship dating. And so I think it must have been my cousin who would have told her, because there's no other way that there would have been a leak, that must have said, oh, Gad is doing really well. He's working well with these guys, whatever. And then she ended up saying, this has to end. She was going to blow it in the open. These guys don't really like to have a lot of attention. And so that was the end of my Israeli spy game career.
Now, we put it to you, why would a self-confessed Mossad asset be on Charlie Kirk's show saying Islam has no place in the West? If not for what we're saying, which is the Netanyahu warmongering policy is to undermine President Trump's peace by making it difficult for Muslims and Jews to find peace in the West, so that Trump and other leaders such as Farage don't carry that mandate to make peace between Muslims and Jews in the East. Why do they not want peace? Because by continuing the war, they get to expand the Likudnik Zionist view of Israel, expand their borders, encroach upon, for example, annex Gaza, encroach upon other territories. The Perma War expands their globalist technocratic state. And of course, via the military industrial complex, they continue to profit. That's why they remain pro-war, and that's why they remain against reconciliation between Muslims and Jews at home in the West, so that the leaders who represent these societies can't make reconciliation between Muslims and Jews abroad. They are stoking division. This is a tried and tested formula. It's been done before. And we mentioned at the beginning of this stream that that's exactly what happened on October the 7th, that Netanyahu facilitated Hamas to strike on October the 7th so that he would have the perfect pretext to war. And that's something which, again, we said we'd show you all the receipts. Again, Ronen Bar, it's spelled R-O-N-E-N, by the way. That's an error there by us. Ronen Bar, head of Israel's domestic intelligence, Shin Bet, just quit yesterday after blaming Netanyahu for facilitating October the 7th attacks by Sinwar's Hamas. Hold all your assumptions. False flag terrorist attacks are being exposed in real time. And we're going to show you the receipts for that right now. But you can see there at the bottom of this image, we'd already published all of this for you in the Radical Dispatch as far back as the 15th of October, 2023, only a few days after the October the 7th attacks. That same few weeks after the attacks, we published, next week, in fact, after the attacks, we published that headline that's at the bottom of the screen for you. Netanyahu funded and supported Hamas for war. Receipts. You can see it being compared with the later 2025 headline from March by the Jerusalem Post above it. It's almost identical. The Jerusalem Post says Netanyahu's funding for Hamas via Qatar enabled October the 7th invasion, Shin Bet reveals. And ours from 2 years prior in the Radical Dispatch, Netanyahu funded and supported Hamas for war. The shadow knows. Now, the head of Israel's internal security, the Shin Bet organization, quit, citing that Netanyahu's facilitation of Hamas on October 7th as the reason for his quitting. And to make it more serious, the former Israeli prime minister, the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, also accused Netanyahu of facilitating jihadism in Gaza and funding it for the purposes of war. We've published all these receipts before in the Radical Dispatch, and we will be republishing them in the written version of this stream in the Radical Dispatch tomorrow. You can go to majidnawaz.substack.com to find all the receipts that we will republish tomorrow. Netanyahu has formed. The Likudnik Zionists have formed. They seek to provoke war, provoke tensions, facilitate terror attacks and false flags in order to use them as a pretext for further war. This is why when October the 7th happened, Netanyahu having facilitated it, he was able to achieve Saudi Arabia withdrawing from the Abraham Peace Accords. It's why when Trump was negotiating with Iran to denuclearize, out of nowhere, suddenly Netanyahu decides to strike at Iran. He sought to derail the peace. Netanyahu and his Likudnik Zionist network seek to circumvent the peace by using war, because they believe in perma-war. It's why you can see people like Elon Musk backing woke candidates on one end and Warhawk candidates on the other. Woke in the sense of Thomas Massey being anti-Israeli, and Warhawk, pro-Netanyahu Warhawk candidates such as Rupert Lowe in the UK. Musk funding both ends because the purpose is to fund the dialectic. It's to fund the division. And through the division, the conflict can continue. It's why you saw there people like Gad Saad, confirmed self-confessed Mossad asset, basically arguing that Islam, in essence, has no place in the West. Again, if Western populations begin sympathizing with the idea that Islam doesn't belong here, it's easier then to sympathize with Netanyahu's idea that Islam doesn't belong in Gaza either. Just as you need anti-Russian propaganda to continue the war in Ukraine, you need anti-Muslim propaganda to continue the war in Gaza. So this is the woke versus Warhawk framing. Bob Villan and Kneecap have fallen for it too. We're asking everybody to understand that the only way to win is not to play. Do not succumb to the radicalization on the woke end of the spectrum, and do not succumb to the radicalization on the Warhawk end of the spectrum either. The way forward is to protect the peace, and protect the peace is what President Trump is clearly trying to do. And any anti-war candidate in the UK's context, the one that has a shot of becoming prime minister, again, apologies in advance to George Galloway, but the one that has a shot of becoming prime minister, a clear advantage, is Nigel Farage, and he will become prime minister. He is the anti-war candidate, and he is the one that, when as prime minister, will work with Trump to bring an end to this hybrid World War III. And it's why people like Musk, people like the wider Likudnik Zionist network, using their assets such as Musk, are funding those candidates that can destabilize the anti-war movements in the US, destabilizing and causing confusion among MAGA, and in the UK, destabilizing Nigel Farage's Brexit base by supporting candidates such as Rupert Lowe. That's what's going on. It's a woke versus Warhawk framing to destabilize the peace. The only way to win is not to play, and the way forward is to protect the peace. That's all we've got time for this week's Warrior Creed live stream. You've been listening to The Radical, Majid Nawaz. We ask all of you over at Radical Media, if you go to majidnawaz.substack.com to sign up as premium members of Radical Media. That gains you access to behind the paywall content, including the audio-visual podcast version of this stream, as well as other paywalled content and the long-form Radical podcasts that are also behind our paywall. We cannot do this work without your support. We encourage you to spread word and to become premium members of Radical Media via majidnawaz.substack.com. Until next week, thank you very much.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.